Right? Usually, the day before the quiz, I have the review, right? That's how we usually do it. But this week is unusual because we have a short week. Like you guys, we were out on Monday, and then you guys are out on Friday. So our quiz is tomorrow, and we're not having a review today because the quiz from tomorrow is going to be very similar to last week, but I'm going to include the new stuff from today. So like I said, today is new stuff, and it is on tomorrow's quiz. Like I said, it's also from last week's stuff. So what we have here, so the image that we have three right triangles. Right? In that image, we have three. So I'm just going to come over it, and each right triangle obviously has a short side, a long side, and a hypotenuse, right? That's how right triangles look like. Remember, the hypotenuse is the biggest side of all three. So let me draw three right triangles as best as I can. From the three triangles that we have in there, we're only going to use two. But the thing is, by looking at it to begin with, we don't quite know which one we're going to use until we actually get the information from the triangles. From my triangles here, I notice that this whole side is 100. Part of it is 36. So for me to find the remaining part, I'm going to go 100 minus 36. So I know this side is 64. Right? We know that that side is 64. Otherwise, because the whole thing was 100, we take away 36. So 100 minus 36, part of it is 64. Right? So now for my three triangles, let me take a look at the little triangle. Right? I'm looking at this triangle here. Right? You guys see which one I have. Notice how x is the hypotenuse, right? It's the biggest out of all three. So let me write my x on the hypotenuse. On the remaining sides, one side is 36, and the other side, I don't know. It seems like the short side is 36, so I'm going to write 36 here. Remember, I had x as the hypotenuse, and the short side was 36 from the small triangle. Now, let me take a look at the middle triangle. And when I mean middle triangle, I'm talking about this one right here. The hypotenuse, I don't know. Right? I don't know the hypotenuse. The short side, which is the one that goes here, I don't know. I don't know the short side. I just know the long side is 64. So let me write for the long side is 64. Remember, I came in and said from the right triangles, I'm going to have a hypotenuse, a short side, and a long side. Now, let me take a look at the big triangle. When I say big triangle, I'm talking about the big one. I know the hypotenuse is 100. So for the hypotenuse, let me write 100. I know the short side is x, and the short side, I don't know. So for short side, let me write x. Remember, I came in and said we're going to have three different triangles. A short one, a middle one, and a big one. From the three, we only need two. And the two that we need are the two triangles that have the two same sides marked. So if you notice, I'm not going to use the middle triangle. I'm going to use the short one and the big. Right? The two sides that I have for the short one are 36 and x. Let me make my proportions. I know 36 is smaller than x. Looking at the big triangle, the numbers that I have are x and 100. I know x is smaller than 100, so I'm going to write x and then 100. Remember, I always write the numbers from small to large. And then, I know when we have two proportions, we can simplify first if possible. 36 over x we cannot do. X over 100 we cannot simplify. Then we also tried sideways, 36 with x and x with 100. Remember, I came in and said multiply if possible. Since we cannot simplify, let me cross multiply. X times x gives me x squared. 36 times 100 gives me 3600. That way I'm going to get rid of the squared. Let me get the square root from both sides. So let me get the square root here and here. I know the square root of x squared is x, where I said that's how I'm going to get rid of the square. What's the square root of 3600? 6. That gives me my value for x equals 6. For similar right triangles, once again, we have 3 different triangles. A small one, a medium, and a large one. You write as much information as you can from each, and at the end, use only the 2 triangles that have the same 2 sides marked. Like I said, we don't, just at the very beginning, we don't know which two of the 3 we're going to use, so we write down as much information as we can, and then we're going to be able to tell. Looking at question number 2, I'm going to say this remaining side here is 64. Because remember, the whole thing is 100. I take away 36, so the remaining side is 64. Let me draw my 3 different triangles. I'm going to have a small one, I'm going to have a medium, and then I'm going to have a large triangle. From the small triangles, which is this one, you guys see I have 36 and x, right? I have 2 numbers on the small triangle. I don't know the hypotenuse. I know 36 is the short side and x is the long side. So I'm going to say 36 and x. Remember, what I don't know is the hypotenuse, which is the biggest out of the 3. If I look at the middle triangle, so I'm talking about this triangle, the information that I have are x and 64. I don't know the hypotenuse of the triangle. I just know the short side is x and the long side is 64. So let me go, short side is x, long side is 64. I'm not even going to look at the big triangle because I already have the first 2 to go by. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to say 36 is smaller than x, and then for the other triangle, x is smaller than 64. There's nothing I can simplify, so let me cross multiply. I know x times x is x squared. How much is 36 times 64? 2,347. Okay. So for me to get rid of the square, let me do the square root. How much is the square root of 2,304? 48. So x equals 48. Let me just skip a few questions because we're not always going to get x squared. I said I wanted to do a couple that get x squared. Let me skip a few because we don't always get x squared. So let's take a look at question number 9. The way I'm going to start drawing my 3 different triangles. Looking at the small triangle, you guys see it here. Looking at the small triangle, I have the measurements 9 and 12. The hypotenuse is what I don't know, right? The biggest out of all 3 is what I don't know. So I know the short side is 9, the long side is 12. So let me write my 9 and my 12. Let me take a look at my middle triangle. That's this one right here, which I have the measurements 12 and x. I don't know the hypotenuse. I just know the short side is 12, the long side is x. I'm going to go like this. And I think we're okay if I don't do the 3rd triangle, because I think with the first 2 we're good. So let me not do the big triangle. So I'm going to come and say, the way I'm going to set this thing up will be 9 and 12, right? 9 is smaller than 12. Remember, I always go from small to large. At the bottom, I'm going to write 12 is smaller than x for the second triangle. We can cross multiply. 9x equals 144. Like if we have a calculator, we just go at it. But if we don't, let me simplify my fractions first. 9 over 12, let me call that 3 over 4. We can cross multiply now. 3x equals 48. Or we can simplify it even more. My 3 with my 12, right, side to side, that's going to become 1 and 4. Right, I'm just simplifying more and more. Now, let me just cross multiply. X equals what? 16. Okay, remember, you don't have to simplify. You can just cross multiply whenever you want. It's just that I simplify to deal with smaller numbers. But if you do have a calculator, then you can just cross multiply from the beginning. Let me pick up the notch on this question a little. Let me take a look at the last question, number 14. Let me start by drawing my 3 triangles. So I know I have a little one, a medium one, and a large one. And I'm going to say for this part right here, I'm going to call this x minus 16. This little part right here. X minus 16. Because I know the whole thing was x, I'm going to take away 16, so obviously that is x minus 16. So for the little triangle, I have the measurements x minus 16 for the short side and 12 for the long side. I don't have the hypotenuse. So I'm going to have x minus 16 and 12 for the small triangle. For the middle triangle, I have the measurements 12 and 16. 12 is smaller than 16. I don't have the hypotenuse. Once again, I think you guys are okay if we don't use the big triangle. The way I'm going to set this thing up will be x minus 6 before 12. And then at the bottom, I'm going to say 12 is smaller than 16. We can just cross multiply. When we cross multiply, and one of my sides has a plus or a minus, don't forget when you cross multiply, the 16 multiply to the x and also to the 6. Don't forget the 16 you multiply to both. If you cross multiply from the beginning, we can simplify first, but if you cross multiply, don't forget that the 16 you multiply to the x and to the 6. Yeah. X minus 16. Oh yeah, x minus 16. Just checking if you guys were awake. I never make mistakes, just check if you guys are awake. But so in this case, don't forget the 16 you multiply to the x and to the 16. Remember, you multiply it to both whenever you cross multiply. But before I cross multiply, let me simplify my fraction. 12 over 16, let me call that 3 over 4. Right, to make my number smaller. Right, we can cross multiply now, and don't forget that the 4, I'll multiply 4 times x and 4 times 16. We can simplify side to side, so yes, the 12 and the 4 will become 3 and 1. I see on this other way 3 and 3, but it's diagonal. That's the only way we cannot simplify, so I'm not going to simplify it. Now when I cross multiply, the 1, make sure you multiply it to the x and to the 16. So 1 times x, 1 times the negative 16 is equal to, here I'm going to get 9. And so when we cross multiply, don't forget that the only number here at the bottom right is multiplied to both, to the x and to the 16. Alright, so if x minus 16 equals 9, what's x? 25. Because I called it picking up a notch a little, because on one of my sides, I was either going to have either a plus or a minus. So that's why I said pick up the notch a little. In my examples, as you guys notice, I never use the big triangle, but let me use one where I will use the big triangle. Let me go back to number 12. I have a small triangle, a middle triangle, and the large triangle. And I know that the hypotenuse of this side is going to be 36 plus x. Right? This whole thing is 36 plus x. Now, if I look at the small triangle, my numbers are 36 for the short side and 60 for the hypotenuse.
How you know when they're add or subtract?
When you're putting two things together, a 36 and an x, and you're putting them together, you add. If you're taking part of it away, then you subtract. Okay. If I look at the middle triangle, let me erase this. If I look at the middle triangle, the only information that I know is one side is x, I have nothing for the short side, and I have nothing for the hypotenuse. All I know is that the long side is x. So obviously my middle triangle is not going to be enough. Right? I need two sides. So that's why I said, in this case, we do need the big triangle. If you look at the big triangle, the short side is 60, and the hypotenuse is 36 plus x. So in this case, I will use the small triangle and the big triangle. Right? The middle one is not enough. Remember, you need two sides per triangle. And the way I will set this thing up will be 36 is smaller than 60. At the bottom, I will go 60 is smaller than 36 plus x. We can cross multiply. Don't forget that 36 multiplied to 36 and 2x. But before we cross multiply, let me simplify my fractions. 36 over 60, let me divide each by 12. 3 over 5. I can also simplify sideways, 3 and 60. Let me divide each by 3. So I get 1 and 20. So now when I cross multiply, don't forget that the 1, we multiply to the 36 and to the x. So 1 times 36, 1 times x equals 100. Right? 20 times 5. I'm cross multiplying. If 36 plus x equals 100, what's x? 64. The idea on this thing is, from the figure that I originally give you, there's 3 triangles. And then you use 2 of them. But at the very, very beginning, you don't know which 2 you're going to use. Right? Either the small one, medium, or large. Just get as much information as you can on each, and then use the 2 that have 2 measurements marked. Alright, any questions? Any questions? Remember, the quiz for tomorrow, you guys have similarity from last week. So everything from last week plus this stuff. Any questions? Let me take roll really quick.